Hi, welcome back to the workshop. Having carved the neck last episode, this time I'm going to return and finish off the fretwork. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is to get some masking tape onto this fretboard just to protect it as best we can from any damage while we're working on it. Okay, so that's all taped up now. You can buy masking tape in varying qualities from not so good to absolutely brilliant. That falls well into the former category, but it's all I've got, so we'll have to make do with it. Okay, so now we've got that taped up and it's all protected from what we're going to do in the next few stages. Next, I'm just going to take a simple magic marker and I'm just going to mark over the frets. The idea being that we're now going to sand that with a straight edge. And once all the black is removed, theoretically, we should have a level fretboard. Now it is worth pointing out at this stage that I checked this neck with a notched straight edge before I started filming, just to make sure that it was absolutely dead straight. It's important to do it with a notched straight edge because you're actually measuring the fretboard, not the frets. Now this was a little bit out, so I've done a tiny little truss rod adjustment on it just to make sure it's perfectly straight. It was probably only kind of a 1/16th to an 1/8 of a turn, but it was enough just to get that absolutely spot on. Now to do the actual levelling, there's many ways of doing it. Some people will use a file, some people will make their own sanding beams out of hardwood. You can obviously buy commercially available sanding beams. I use an old level with some sandpaper, double-sided tape to it. But it isn't just an old level. It has been actually very carefully prepared, so I know it's as straight as I need this to be. I've got nothing against other methods. I probably will spend the money and invest in a proper sanding beam at some stage, but this works fine. And if you are going about this on a budget, it is always worth bearing in mind that, you know, at least while you're starting out, there's other ways and means of doing things. Okay, so there's not really much more to talk about now. We just need to crack on and get this leveled off. Now, I'm not going to go at this like a bull at a gate. I'm going to take just steady, gentle passes up the neck until we get to the place where we need to be, where there's no more black showing. And I also need to pay attention to make sure I'm following the radius as I go around the neck, just to make sure that I'm not introducing flat spots or anything. So I'm just going to have a quick look at that. You're probably not going to be able to see from there, but I've got most of the black off, but there are 1 or 2 frets just in this area here that it hasn't touched yet. Okay, and you might just be able to see just up around the treble side of the like 10th, 11th, 12th frets. We've still got quite a lot of the blue on, so I'll just continue to work that down until we've got rid of the rest of it. Okay, so that's got all the frets down to level now, but I'm not finished with this stage just yet. I've got one more little thing that I'm going to do. It's not absolutely necessary this stage, but it's something that I always tend to do. And what I'm going to do, I'll put 3 layers of masking tape over the 12th fret. I'm going to re-black all the frets beyond that. And I'm just going to go through the same process with the beam and just take them down from there. And take that tape back off again. And I'll just give it a quick clean up while I'm at it. And what that little exercise does is just creates a little bit of fall away from the 12th fret to the end of the fretboard, and that just helps the overall playability when you're at the dusty end of the neck. I don't know why I bother doing it on my guitars. I very rarely get past the 5th fret, but there you go. Okay, so that's the frets levelled, but as you can see, it's left the top of that fret very flat in profile, but some of them where it hasn't touched quite so much are a little bit more rounded. So now what we need to do is to re-crown these frets, and all that simply means is we replace the profile that was initially there before we levelled them off and sanded all that material away. And to get these frets crowned, we're going to use a file. And there's a couple of ways you can go about this. There's this type of file that actually has a curved or a concave cutting surface on the edges. This is a Hosco file, so it's a nice file, does the job very well, but it's not my favourite way of doing it. I prefer the old-fashioned triangular crowning file. This one's from Crimson, very, very nice tool, and that's what I'm going to use on this one. I might actually do a couple with the Hosco file just so you can see how that works as well. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do before I start to recrown these frets is just to get a bit more black over the top of them so I can see what I'm doing. So next up, I just need to clean my file. If you've got files, you need a file card. Make your life a lot easier. Okay, so let's get to the crowning. Now I'm going to bring you in with the other camera and try and get a bit closer in so you can see what I'm actually doing here. So what I'm going to do now is just take the file and work away at the sides of this fret until I'm left with just a thin line in the middle of black. It doesn't actually take that long to do, usually a few strokes and you're somewhere near. So here we go. Okay, and that's pretty much where we need to be with it. So there's just that thin line of black remaining in the middle. What I will then do is I will go in with a smaller, finer file and just kind of take any little file marks out. I'll also use this file to form the fret ends once we get to that stage. So I'm going to go down the rest of these frets now and get them all somewhere near where we need them to be. A few things worth mentioning before I go much further is this file has got safe edges. on all three corners, so it's not going to dig into the fretboard at all. Probably can't see it, but I can. All it's doing is leaving a little mark on the masking tape, so that's really good. The other thing is you need to be trying to leave that little black line smack in the centre of the fret, because obviously you've cut these fret slots very, very accurately to make sure that your guitar neck is going to sound as it should. So it only makes sense that the crown of the fret, the bit where the string is actually going to touch, is aligned with that fret slot. Okay, so you want it on the centre over the tang. And obviously it also makes sense that if you want that to be in the centre of the fret, you work in alternating from side to side. So 2 or 3 strokes one side, 2 or 3 the other, and that will keep it all centred. And as promised, I'll just do a couple with the Hosco file, just so you can see how that works as well. Now, if anything, I find this file is probably a little bit quicker to use, but on the downside, as you can probably see in these close-up shots, it does leave file marks in the frets that you need to take out, where the other file doesn't. And it's got quite a sharp edge along here, so it does kind of, I wouldn't say it digs into the fretboard, but it will kind of pull the masking tape off, and it more kind of polishes the rosewood a little bit, which is not something you want particularly. Right, with that done, I'm just going to take the smaller file now and just go over those, take out any rough file marks or anything that might be in there. Okay, so I've been along the neck now, I've recrowned with the big file, I've cleaned up with the smaller file. So the next job is to smooth off the end of all these frets. And the idea here is I'm going to give them something similar to a hemispherical end. So I'll bring you in closer and I'll show you exactly how I go about that. Okay, to do this job, all I'm going to do is just work my way around with this little file. And just round over the end of that fret so it's nice and smooth to the touch. Obviously we need to go over this with various grades of wet and dry paper, etc. But that will give us the start of what we need there. Now, the quality of this fretwork will really dictate how the guitar feels and how it plays, so it is worth taking the time to make sure that you get this section absolutely spot on. But I can already feel the difference between the few that I've done down here and the ones that I haven't touched. They feel much, much better. So I'm just going to carry on now and go through the rest of the neck. Okay, so that's all the fret ends done now. They're feeling lovely and smooth. So the next step is I need to take the scratches left by the levelling beam on the top of the frets. So I've just got a flat block of wood and some fine sandpaper. So I'm starting off at 400 and I'm going to work my way up from there. And I'm just very gently going over the top. Now I'm not taking off enough material to kind of affect any of the levelling on this. simply just to remove those scratches from the sanding. And it's at this stage that I'm going to go over it now with the fret rocker and just make sure I haven't got any rogue frets and that we haven't affected anything with the other operations. So I'm going to go through the whole neck and check that and get back with you in a second. Okay, so I've been over with the fret rocker, we're all good, we're absolutely golden. So the next step is, I mean this is a first for me, I've got myself a set of fret erasers, and I've never used these before. And I've got 4 grits. I've got a coarse, a medium, a fine and a super fine. So I'm just going to spend a bit of time going over these frets with the fret erasers, just cleaning them up, getting a little bit of a polish onto them. So I've just been over this with the 4 grades of fret eraser. Yeah, I actually quite enjoyed using those. They've got all the little scratches out and got it to a nice finish. So yeah, could be converted to them. Okay, so the final step in this process is just to polish these frets now. I'm going to use a Dremel. I'm going to use some Autosol. I've always done it that way, always got good results, so I don't see any reason to change. And it's just a case of putting a little bit of polish on the fret. And giving it a bit of a polish. And that's really come up quite nice. So I'm just going to crack on now and get the rest of them done. Okay, so that's all the frets polished up nicely. They come up really, really well. There's a couple of little tests I always like to do when I get to this stage. Basically, run a thumbnail along the fret. And if there's any unevenness, any sanding marks or gouges in there, you'll feel that in your thumbnail. These are really nice and smooth, there's nothing there. Reason that's important is if there was any sanding marks left in these frets, any little gouges, unevenness, when you were trying to bend a string on these, you would feel it and hear it grating as it went up. But there's not going to be any issues of that. And the other thing is, I just like to run my fingers along the edge just to make sure that those fret ends are nice and smooth, and they are. I'm really happy with those. Okay, so the next little bit is to get all this masking off and get this all cleaned up. Okay, so that's all the masking off, but there is kind of quite a lot of crud on there still, so I'm just going to give it a quick spritz with some fretboard cleaner, give it a bit of a scrub up. Okay, so that's the bulk of it off. I'm absolutely desperate to chuck some oil on this fretboard. That look of the dark rosewood against the bright frets, kind of really one of my favourite parts of guitar building. But I can't do that because obviously I'm going to be spraying this neck in the next day or so. So any kind of oil that might escape onto the back of the neck, etc., would be very unhelpful in the spraying process. So I'm going to resist doing that for now. realistically, there's only one more little task that I need to do on this neck. It's not essential, but it's something that I like to do. And I'm just going to take a sharp utility knife blade, and I'm just going to take the corner off in between the frets, very gently. I won't take much, a couple of passes, just to round that over a little bit, and it just gives it that kind of played in feel. I'm going to take a little bit, this is 1200 paper, and I'm just going to very quickly clean that up. And in combination with the rounded over fret ends, that just gives a really pleasant feel to the edge of the fretboard. Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, with all that done, I'm going to call it quits for this episode. I hope you found that useful and informative. If there's anything you would need a little bit more clarification on, please feel free to contact me in the comments below. Happy to answer any questions that might come up. I'm getting towards the end of this build now, so I'm busy making plans and buying materials and hardware, etc. for the next build. And in the next episode, I'm also going to be making an announcement about the Great Guitar Build Off 2021. So to ensure you don't miss out on any of those things, make sure you subscribe to the channel, make sure you've clicked the little bell icon, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.